The day after the wedding, Ken and my mother-in-law started ignoring me. Even after 6 months, the situation didn't change and I was in despair. Then one day, my mother-in-law called me at work. After ignoring me for half a year, what does she want now? I was angry, but if it was an emergency, I had to respond. I fell down the stairs and hurt my back. Call an ambulance right away. Annoyed, I called the ambulance. Then Ken called. Go to the hospital with Mom. She fractured her back. She wasn't going to have surgery, but would be treated at home. Quit your job and take care of Mom. You, her son, should take care of her. It's your duty to take care of your mother-in-law. Ridiculous. I'm not a free servant. I requested a week of vacation, packed my things, and moved to a weekly rental apartment. Burning with anger, I vowed in my heart. Ken and his mother. You will pay for trampling on my feelings and treating me like dirt. I am Lynn, a 42-year-old housewife. I've been married to Ken for 6 months. I met Ken at a cooking class. Although he is not good at cooking, he is diligent and earnest in his work. I lost my father in my 20s, and I felt a kinship with Ken, who also lost a parent young. After a year of dating, our marriage was quickly decided. Ken's mother, whom I was introduced to, seemed friendly and pleasant. I also got along well with his sister, Hannah, and had high hopes for our married life. However, after the engagement, Ken's mother soon revealed her true nature. After we got married, Ken's mother asked me, I've been living with my son, and now that Ken has left, I'm lonely. Can I live with you too? In short, she was forcing us to live together. Unlike me, who started living alone when I moved to New York for college, Ken had continued living at his family's home, worried about leaving his mother alone after his father passed away. Right after Ken proposed to me, he said he wanted to get used to living together, so we decided to live at my house before we got married. I don't live in a condo, I live in my mother's childhood home. When I moved to New York, I had it renovated and took over the place. I'm gonna invite Mom too. We're gonna live together eventually, so it doesn't matter if it's sooner or later, right? Since Ken's mother was alone, I expected this conversation to happen someday, but I felt uneasy hearing it said so matter-of-factly. However, I didn't want to cause any trouble before the wedding, so I just let it slide. Let's have Mom live on the first floor. It's a shame the house isn't set up for 2 families, but there's a bathroom and a small kitchen upstairs too. We have extra rooms, so it'll be fine. It feels spacious now, but if we have 2 kids, it'll be cramped for 5 of us. I gently objected, but Ken ignored me and started preparing to move his mother in. After a while, his mother sold their family home and moved into our house. Then, she started acting like it was her own house. It became a daily occurrence for me to come home from work and find her in the upstairs living room, watching TV with snacks. Both Ken and I work full-time, so dinner is late. We had agreed to only have meals together on weekends, but she never cooked for herself and made me do it. Hey, isn't dinner ready yet? I'm starving. We would wait for Ken to get home and eat together, and every time she would criticize my housekeeping. Lynn, there was soap scum in the bathtub. The towels were wrinkled too. You can't slack off just because you have a job. I couldn't help but respond to her complaints. Actually, Ken cleaned the bathroom and hung up the laundry. Mom. Lynn's doing her best. Ken would interrupt me with a grin. She'll be as perfect as you someday. I suppose. Young people these days are so quick to cut corners. After his mother went back to her room, I protested to Ken. Hey, I'm fed up with her snide remarks every day. Can I explain that we share the chores? If she knew her precious son was doing housework, Mom would be furious. Ken's words made me realize how outdated his thinking was. We agreed to spend time in our own spaces except in emergencies. But your mom is walking around the house like she owns the place. She even goes into our bedroom without permission. What's the big deal about that? No matter how much I complained, Ken never paid attention, and my protests were always in vain. Eventually, once my mother-in-law realized Ken was on her side, she became increasingly brazen. While I was out, she would rummage through the shoe closet and wardrobes, were my clothes, and go on trips or to shows. Given her fuller figure, she looked like a stuffed sausage in my slim clothes, but she was quite pleased with herself. Naturally, the clothes came back with broken hooks, missing buttons, and torn fabric. When I asked her to stop, she ignored me. Trying to talk to Ken was futile as he suddenly had more overtime and business trips, making him unavailable. Mothers and sisters often share clothes, don't they? It seems like a close-knit family thing. But Ken would cut me off, frowning. I'm busy training an intern. Don't bother me too much. While I was at my wit's end, Hannah called one day, inviting me to lunch. When I met her, we quickly became friends, bonding over our shared interest in the same TV show, as evident from our phone wallpapers. Since then, we've had lunch and attended events together, like friends. That weekend, I met Hannah at a cafe and told her about her mom. She grimaced. I'm sorry our mom is causing you trouble, Lynn. Hannah, you don't need to apologize. I haven't been handling it well either. Hannah shook her head, frowning. She looks down on daughters and daughters-in-law, seeing them as weaker. But she's always doted on Ken. She rested her chin on her hand, gazing into the distance. Ken has always been pampered just because he's a man. He could do no wrong and was always indulged. Is that so? Hannah spoke with a look of frustration. I wasn't allowed to go to activities, and my parents didn't pay for college, so I had to study hard and go on a scholarship. But Ken went to the private university he wanted. Hannah's voice was gloomy as she concluded. I'm happy that you've become like a sister to me, Lynn, but I wouldn't recommend marrying that guy. Well, but we're already together. Hannah furrowed her brow and muttered. I couldn't stand a mother-in-law like that. And living together? No way, even if they paid me. I nodded at Hannah's words, but I didn't have the courage to give up my relationship with Ken. I had already announced my colleagues, and the wedding invitations had been sent out. Besides, breaking off the engagement just because I didn't get along with my mother-in-law would seem selfish. 6 months passed, and I faced the wedding with anxiety smoldering in my heart. During the ceremony, the congratulatory messages from the guests, the dazzling scene, and the smiles of my mother and friends lifted my spirits, allowing me to temporarily forget my frustrations with Ken and my mother-in-law. Even my mother-in-law pretended to be kind in front of the relatives, treating me nicely as if her usual snide remarks had never happened. That evening, after cleaning up from dinner and taking a shower, I was reading a book in the bedroom when Ken called me from downstairs. When I went to the living room, Ken and my mother-in-law were there, both with meaningful expressions on their faces. I noticed a paper in Ken's hand and felt a chill. Hey! Why do you have divorce papers? Ken was holding signed divorce papers. Ignoring my question, he smirked and said, You told Hannah about Mom and me at the cafe, didn't you? Ken's rough tone was unlike him, and I couldn't help but look at his face in surprise. Huh? Mom was sitting at a nearby table. Seeing me gasp, my mother-in-law shrugged. It's embarrassing for a daughter-in-law to share family matters with outsiders. I'm sorry, but Hannah is our family. My mother-in-law's eyes widened, and she shouted. A married daughter is already cut off from the family. I was overwhelmed by her forcefulness and couldn't say anything. Ken and his mother looked at me appraisingly. Well, we've been watching you for a while, and this isn't gonna work. What do you think, Ken? I agree. She's not suitable for my family. I stared at Ken and his mother in shock. We had just had our wedding, and they were saying this? That's right. We need to train her properly. I don't want to be embarrassed in the future. Exactly. We need to fix that rebellious attitude. After this ominous conversation, Ken glared at me with cold eyes and said in a harsh tone, If you go against us, I'll divorce you anytime. Remember that. Ken put the signed divorce papers in the drawer, laughing with his mother, left me stunned and moved to the living room. Their words and actions kept me awake all night. I felt suffocated with a horrible feeling, but I didn't want to start my first day as a newlywed with a gloomy face. I washed my face, tried to cheer myself up, and started preparing breakfast. After a while, my mother-in-law, still in her pajamas, and Ken, dressed in his shirt, appeared in the living room. They both yawned and stretched as they sat at the table. "Good morning. Breakfast will be ready soon." I greeted them cheerfully, but there was no response. Ken was reading the newspaper, and his mother started watching the morning news on TV from the sofa. I wondered if they didn't hear me, so I continued plating breakfast. "Would you like jam or chocolate cream with your bread?" Even when I called out loudly, they still didn't respond. They couldn't have suddenly gone deaf. As I tilted my head in confusion, my mother-in-law turned to Ken and spoke with a smile. "Ken, look at today's puppy. It's like cotton candy. So cute." "What, you want a dog again?" "You know I can't stand dogs." My mother-in-law teased Ken as he made a sulky face. "Such a big guy, scared of a puppy. It's hilarious." "Shut up." The two of them laughed together joyfully. "Breakfast is ready." As I placed breakfast on the kitchen counter, my mother-in-law came to the table. We set the dishes on the table, chatting and eating. Their attitude made me feel uneasy. They were pretending not to hear me and avoiding eye contact, acting like I didn't exist. They finished their meal while chatting and laughing, then left for work and a walk. I went to work feeling troubled, but during lunch, I had an epiphany. What Ken had said about fixing my attitude so I couldn't talk back, this was it. My mother-in-law and Ken were ignoring me together. How childish, I thought, laughing to myself. Surely, they'd get bored of this elementary school level game and start talking to me normally again. However, the strange situation lasted longer than I expected. Even as the months changed and spring turned into summer, they continued to ignore me completely. If it had just been living with Ken, it wouldn't have hurt this much. But seeing Ken and my mother-in-law happily chatting while I was excluded was mentally exhausting. Whether they were together or not, one would always ignore me if the other was absent. Desperate for any interaction, I kept smiling and talking to them every day. I'd tell myself each night, today didn't work, but tomorrow, they'll at least acknowledge me. Soon, this became my nightly routine. I even started to miss my mother-in-law's snide remarks. "Ken, what do you want for dinner tonight, fish or meat? Please, say something." Ken remained silent. "Why are you ignoring me? Tell me the reason. How long are you going to keep this up?" Even when I pleaded, he completely ignored me. So, I turned to my mother-in-law. "If it's my fault, I'll fix it. I'll apologize for complaining to Hannah. Just talk to me like before." I swallowed my pride and tried to get her to respond. But she wouldn't acknowledge me either. Eventually, my nightly routine turned into negative thoughts. Today, they ignored me again. Tomorrow will be the same. I felt helpless. I told myself that I was just air, invisible to them, and that it was only natural for them to ignore me. This thought gave me a bit of relief from the misery. By the time we had been married for 6 months, I drastically reduced the time I spent at home on weekends. I quickly finished the housework, prepared meals for Ken and his mother, and spent the rest of the night at a hotel. This was the only way to keep myself from breaking down completely. Watching Ken and my mother-in-law happily chatting caused a sharp pain in my stomach. What was my purpose in this house? Since getting married, Ken had dumped all the housework on me, treating me like an ATM and a servant. During work, I could forget about it, but as the end of the day approached, my chest tightened and my heart raced. On the train ride home, I sometimes felt so desperate that I rode all the way to the end of the line, contemplating running away. Should I just get a divorce? But divorcing after only 6 months of marriage would be embarrassing in front of my mother and relatives. That morning, I tried to forget Ken and my mother-in-law's harassment by focusing on my computer work. Then, a call was transferred to me from the operator. It was from my mother-in-law. After ignoring me for 6 months, what does she want now? I felt a surge of anger. I thought about hanging up, but then reconsidered, thinking it might be an emergency. Hello?
Lynn! Call an ambulance right now.
What? I blurted out, bewildered. What happened? Can't you call one yourself? I replied coldly, but my mother-in-law screamed.
I fell down the stairs and hurt my back. I can't move because of the pain. Just call the ambulance already.
Is this how you ask someone for help? Feeling annoyed, I answered. Okay, I'll arrange it. But from now on, call my phone. I hung up and called for an ambulance. Given my resentment, I didn't feel any sympathy. Later, during my lunch break, my phone rang. It was Ken, and he sounded angry.
Where are you?
I'm at work, having lunch.
How can you eat when Mom is in such a bad state?
Ken shouted.
Mom broke her back. Go to the hospital right now.
I was a bit surprised at how serious it was. Is she being hospitalized? No, it's home treatment. But she needs to rest for 3 to 4 months, so she needs care. Well, it sounds like it's going to be busy. Then Ken commanded harshly. So quit your job and take care of her. What? I almost dropped the sandwich I was holding. Ken continued as if it was the most natural thing. You need to take care of Mom until she can move again. It's just supporting her when she walks, helping her with the toilet and bath, and assisting with changing clothes. It should be easy, right? I was speechless. They had both ignored me until this morning, and now they had the audacity to make such a request. Suppressing my rising anger, I said to Ken,
You're her son, you should take care of her.
It's your duty. I have a job. Ken said in a tone that suggested I was the one being unreasonable.
I work full-time too.
Anyone can do office work. You can be replaced easily. Besides, you earn less than me. His presumption made my blood boil.
That's not the point. Stop complaining and go to the hospital. How can a family not help each other?
Ken's shouting made me feel cold inside. This is ridiculous. I'm not a free servant.
Hey, are you listening? Fulfill your duties as a daughter-in-law.
I was so furious I hung up the phone mid-sentence. I interrupted my lunch, went back to my desk, and applied for a week's vacation. Fortunately, it was a slow period at work, so it was approved quickly. I booked a rental condo near my workplace, went home, packed my clothes into a suitcase, and left the house. Burning with anger, I vowed to myself. Ken and my mother-in-law, you will pay for trampling on my feelings and treating me like dirt. The next day, Ken and my mother-in-law began bombarding me with phone calls. When I checked my phone during lunch or after work, there were dozens of missed calls and messages each day. My mother-in-law, in particular, would call and message at all hours, even in the middle of the night. After ignoring them for 3 days, I reluctantly answered one of Ken's calls. What do you want?
Where the hell have you been while Mom's in trouble? Get back here and fulfill your duties as a daughter-in-law.
What duties? I played dumb, and Ken exploded.
Taking care of Mom, obviously. It's a big deal without you here. She needs help going to the bathroom, bathing, and I'm the one buying ready-made meals. With the medical bills and the rental cost of the hospital bed, it's extra expenses we can't afford.
Oh, that sounds tough. Good luck.
Why should I be doing this? Get back here and take care of Mom. Are you gonna repay us by being ungrateful?
His ridiculous argument almost made me laugh. When did I ever rely on you two? I've been insulted, belittled, and ignored by both of you. Those memories are still fresh in my mind.
Let bygones be bygones. Don't you know about the spirit of helping each other?
His arrogant statement made me feel like my blood vessels were about to burst. You and your mom are always so close, so you should be the one helping her out in times like this. I said irritably. Ken responded with frustration.
I told you, I'm busy. This is a woman's job.
He kept repeating the same line.
Since you refused, I called Hannah. It's a shame she has to get involved, even though she's cut ties with us. You called Hannah?
Ken explained my surprised reaction.
She said it's hard to quit her job right away, so she asked for a week. She also needs to discuss it with her husband. So, Hannah is coming too.
After thinking for a moment, I told Ken.
All right, I'll come back home. But I need time to hand over my work, so it's hard to do it right away. I'll come with Hannah. Can you handle things until then?
Ken, in his usual arrogant manner, replied.
Fine, I'll allow it.
Thank you. Of course, I had no intention of quitting my job. Neither did Hannah. After hanging up, I called Hannah and we made plans for the future. A week later, I returned home with Hannah. In the living room, connected to the Japanese-style room, there was a reclining bed with my mother-in-law lying on it. She had indeed broken her back. As soon as they saw us, Ken and my mother-in-law started complaining.
Acting all high and mighty for such a trivial job. Hurry up and get back here. Yeah. What's more important, your job or me?
I almost blurted out that my job was more important, but I bit my tongue. Hannah seemed to share the same thought, her cheek twitching.
I'm sorry for being late, Mom. But isn't it true that lying in bed all the time slows down recovery? It's better to move a bit with a back brace, right?
Hannah, having done her research, carefully chose her words and addressed Ken and my mother-in-law.
Mom, you might be a bit chubby, but with Ken's muscular build, he should be able to take care of you just fine.
Watching my mother-in-law and Ken sulk in silence, I agreed with Hannah.
If we set up a portable toilet in the living room and put non-slip mats and a shower chair in the bathroom, it would make things a lot easier. We could also order meal deliveries.
Then my mother-in-law, clearly annoyed, said,
How can I let Ken handle the toilet stuff? It's always been a woman's job to take care of parents.
Here we go again, I thought, feeling exasperated. Neither Ken nor my mother-in-law seemed willing to update their outdated views.
Oh, give me a break.
Hannah glared at them with burning anger.
It seems I've always been a convenient tool for both of you. It's always been that way. I was always the one who had to endure.
Her low voice, filled with resentment, made my mother-in-law and Ken flinch.
No matter how hard I studied or excelled in sports, getting awards, neither Mom nor Dad showed any interest. I can't remember a single time I was praised. They even opposed me going to college. But Ken got to do karate and soccer, and when he won a tournament, we went out for fancy sushi. I didn't mean to spoil him.
My mother-in-law stammered, while Ken laughed scornfully.
Hannah, were you jealous of me? It's natural for a man to be valued more. If you don't like it, be born a man next time.
Then he turned to me, his tone sharp with anger.
By the way, Lynn, you're the worst. Leaving home when the family is in trouble is beyond irresponsible.
His words hit a nerve, and I snapped back.
That's my line. You should take care of your own parents instead of making your sister and wife do it. We're not free servants. Oh? Are you planning to defy me, a mere woman?
Ken narrowed his eyes and spoke in a menacing tone.
You became part of this family, so you should be more obedient. You should be grateful you even got to marry me.
That's right. When you're in trouble, family helps each other.
This is exactly when we need to cooperate.
My mother-in-law smiled smugly. Hannah and I exchanged glances.
What a noble statement. But Ken, you were complaining about the extra expenses of Mom's care, weren't you? What? I never said anything like that. Oh, really? You forgot what you said yourself?
How pathetic. I chuckled, pulled out my phone, and played a recording.
I'm the one buying the ready-made meals. With the treatment costs and the rental fees for the hospital bed, it's just extra expenses.
Oh, that sounds tough. Hang in there.
Why do I have to do this?
Ken turned pale, and my mother-in-law glanced at him sideways.
Oh, so that's how you felt.
Well, it's a woman's duty, right? I'm not involved.
It's not unrelated. You're my son.
Ken shrank even further under his mother's reproach.
May I ask you something?
I smiled at my indignant mother-in-law.
What is it? When you say helping each other in times of trouble, does that include dipping into your son's savings for pocket money? What?
Ken's eyes widened while his mother froze. Didn't you know?
A significant amount of your savings has been withdrawn.
I opened the drawer, took out Ken's bank statement, and spread it on the table. Ken panicked when he saw the balance reduced to just a few $100s.
Mom, did you spend it? I told you that you didn't have to worry about living expenses since you're on a pension, and I give you an allowance of $1,000 a month. Travel, concerts, and merchandise must be expensive.
I handed Ken the receipts I had found in my mother-in-law's room.
$1,000 for a hotel, $600 for theater tickets, $2,000 for merchandise? That's way too much.
My mother-in-law immediately looked displeased.
My friend's husband gives her $2,000 a month for pocket money. I want that much too. But isn't it wrong to rack up $20,000 in debt on someone else's card? $20,000?
Ken's eyes widened as he looked at the credit card statement I handed him, then he stared at the ceiling. It seemed he hadn't checked the card, which he rarely used. Ignoring him, my mother-in-law voiced her dissatisfaction.
What a stingy wife! You spent a lot of money on Ken for his college and extracurricular activities. I have a right to it. How is that a little? And besides, you were a housewife. Dad was the one who provided the money. I appreciate his support, but this is different. Use Dad's inheritance. That's long gone,
she said nonchalantly. Ken turned pale, then his face flushed red as he scolded his mother harshly.
What? You used up all $600,000? That's impossible. Wait, half of that was my share.
I'll pay you back eventually. Seeing Ken's furious expression, even his mother looked uneasy. Ken then held his head and knelt on the spot with a pathetic look.
What should I do? I was planning to use the inheritance to pay off another credit card debt.
Ken, who suddenly started to panic, stood up as soon as our eyes met. He grabbed my arm tightly, his eyes bloodshot, and began to plead frantically.
Lynn, you're gonna help me, right? We're family. We should support each other in times like this, right?
Support each other? What do you mean by that? I asked coldly. Ken, with a nervous laugh, made a ridiculous proposal.
You've been saving money since you were single, right? You should have a decent amount by now. So, can you pay off my debt for me? Even if you earn less than me, you still make a fair amount.
I felt a headache coming on. Did he forget all the mistreatment he had put me through? I refuse. As I flatly refused, Ken and my mother-in-law were stunned.
What a cold-hearted wife! That's why I can't stand you. You're refusing my request? How dare you defy me as my wife?
Ignoring Ken's outburst, I spoke calmly.
We're no longer related. What? I signed and submitted the divorce papers that were in the drawer.
Ken and his mother were trembling.
You've got to be kidding me. This has to be a joke.
Is this a joke too? I placed a receipt from a hotel on the table, which I had found in Ken's study. Ken stiffened.
How did you? A message from your mistress came to the phone you left on the couch.
I showed Ken the message saved on my phone, and he looked disturbed.
Ken, the trip was so fun. By the way, when are you gonna leave your wife? I want to get married soon.
I want to be with you soon too, Yvonne. But my mom broke her back, so it might take a bit longer. Yvonne replied with a character showing an annoyed expression.
Don't make a fuss over an affair, Lynn.
My mother-in-law sighed, but I showed her the rest of the message, and her expression changed.
Seriously? No way I'm dealing with caregiving.
Don't worry, Yvonne. I'll take care of my mom. Once she recovers, I'll kick her out of the house.
Good. I don't want to live with her.
My mother-in-law started trembling with anger.
What? You're gonna kick me out? You're choosing your mistress over your own mother? Shut up. You've been staying at the house for a while now, so you should be satisfied.
Ken snapped, glaring at his mother. They glared at each other for a moment.
Ken, why did you marry me?
When I asked, Ken answered casually.
For your looks. You're pretty enough to match me and have a nice figure. Then why did you cheat on me right after we got married? She's younger and more my type.
Can't help it. Ken leaned back arrogantly. Finally, it all made sense. Because our marriage was based on such shallow reasons, he felt no guilt teaming up with his mother to ignore me. With a deep sigh, I turned to Hannah.
Thank you, Hannah. I recorded Ken's confession so I could get divorced smoothly.
Ken and his mother widened their eyes.
I didn't do anything wrong.
Even now, their lack of remorse left me speechless.
Do as you like. Oh, by the way, I sent recordings of your insults to the manager's wife, including your infidelity and harassment of the intern.
Ken and his mother instantly turned pale.
The manager's wife? You know her?
Did you forget?
She was the instructor at the cooking class where we met.
Ken finally realized and was at a loss for words. His mouth opening and closing silently.
She was furious about the insult. She said she'd report it to the manager immediately. You might get fired.
My mother-in-law grabbed my sleeve, almost in tears.
Lynn, I'm sorry for ignoring you. I was just annoyed about losing my son and wanted to be mean. Please, Lynn, let's start over. If you don't help, Mom and I will be buried in debt and out on the street.
Ken clung to me, teary-eyed. I shook off their hands and coldly dismissed them.
I don't care what happens to you. You two can work together to pay off the debt. Your family, after all.
Then I added,
and since this is my house, please leave. If you dawdle, I'll have you forcibly removed. What? But I'm injured. You have no heart.
Hannah also spoke up to her tearful mother and brother.
That's rich coming from you. You used up all of Dad's inheritance without giving me a single penny. I thought you didn't need it.
My mother-in-law stammered.
As of today, I'm cutting ties with you too. Do whatever you want from now on.
Ken knelt on the floor, his head hanging low, while his mother sniffled in bed. Leaving them behind, Hannah and I walked out of the house. Without the money on hand, they had to borrow money from somewhere eventually. They also put up a fuss about vacating the house, but when we threatened to take them to civil court, they moved to a rundown house nearby, with Ken pushing his mother in a rented wheelchair. A few days later, Ken was fired from his job. According to the manager's wife, complaints from the interns had already sealed his fate. Ken, dissatisfied with being demoted to a regular employee, took out his frustration on junior staff and eventually quit. He naively thought he could quickly find a job at another top company because of his education, but over 40, he struggled to find a permanent position and ended up working multiple part-time jobs. Ken diligently paid off both his and his mother's debts while she spent her days idly. Eventually, they had a huge fight, and Ken threw his mother out. She called me, screaming.
Even as an ex-wife, how can you leave your mother-in-law in trouble? You should help me out of gratitude.
Realizing that reasoning with her was futile, I blocked both Ken and his mother's contacts. Later on, Yvonne quit her job and moved away. Having cut ties with Ken and his mother, I now enjoy my days in peace. I have no intention of ever seeing them again, but I occasionally have lunch or attend events with Hannah. Though my marriage failed, I gained a friend who shares my interests, which makes me happy. From now on, I plan to fully enjoy both my work and personal